These last 2 weeks have been very heavy and intense energetically for me personally. A lot of old pain and old patterns coming back again unexpectedly. And I've been reflecting a lot on authenticity and objectification, especially self-objectification, because I've also been reflecting a lot on what I actually want to let go of now that the year of the wood snake is coming to an end. So I've been thinking a lot about what it means to be seen through someone else's eyes. And that is very nuanced, because being seen through someone else's eyes can be beautiful, because sometimes another person that we feel very connected to on a soul level, they can reflect something back to us about ourselves that we weren't able to see on our own. And sometimes being seen, and especially being desired in our full authenticity, especially with our whole messiness, it can help us to look at ourselves differently, and it can help us to recognize and maybe even to love ourselves more. So this kind of mirroring can be very healing. But there is another kind of gaze, external gaze, one that many of us internalize. It's a gaze that evaluates and that categorizes and that turns us into something that is perceived instead of someone who is perceiving, right? And that's different. And that's a very special phenomenon. And like individually, it's also a protection strategy, asking yourself, how am I being perceived? How do I appear from the outside? Who am I in the mirror of someone else's gaze? Maybe someone who has power over me, who I depend on especially. And that's deeply human. And if we go back into our own history, early childhood, relational history, we will most likely find that being seen once meant being safe, and being validated meant being protected, and being desired or praised meant not being abandoned. And the question is, were we seen as our full authentic selves growing up, or did we have to hide certain parts in order to be safe? And so many of us live our lives that way, actually. We're hiding parts of ourselves, certain parts, in order to feel safe and in control. But what this actually does is it's keeping us from growing and expanding. We adapt and we cater to an external gaze that doesn't reflect our whole being. But yet it makes us feel safe and in control, and it gives us identity, but it's an inflated identity, one that is inflated by mirrors. And, those mirrors, they reflect how we appear, how we function, how we compare. But they don't reflect our whole spectrum. In the last 2 weeks especially, a lot of information has surfaced globally. And I don't know about you, but I found it very difficult to digest. And because it touched something very personal for me. And it's also reminding us once again, how easily human beings can be turned into objects, especially women, young women, but also people who were born with less privilege and power. And this makes me really, really sad and really angry. But I don't want to go into that energy field of fear. And that's also why I'm making this video right now. You know, objectification is not a abstract concept. It's a lived memory for many of us, right? To be reduced, to be evaluated, to be consumed, just not to be recognized as a subject. And this is very common in systems. And I mean, we live in this big system, but you always live in systems, right? In systems where relationships are transactional and humans become numbers and commodities and bundles of measurable traits. So I feel like in times like these, where collective revelations expose those patriarchal and colonial structures, right? They don't just collapse institutions, they collapse whole illusions, and that's actually a good thing. They force us to look at the deeper pattern. Also, regarding ourselves, where do we have internalized that gaze when it comes to ourselves? Where have we participated, often unconsciously, in seeing ourselves as objects? And, you know, I'm just a small channel here. I'm talking about very personal things from my personal perspective, but the personal and the collective are always connected, you know? And it would be just blind to say that what is happening right now globally on a societal level isn't affecting us individually. And it would be also blind to say that our individual healing doesn't affect the collective. So it's very important to reflect on these things and to see, you know, the connections. I'm a person, I'm a human, a living being. That's how I would describe myself first, you know, not as a gender or as a number. I don't like that, but most people perceive or read me as a woman. I'm in my 40s, and that's also nothing I think about usually. It's nothing of importance for me, really. Because internally, I don't experience myself as a woman in my 40s. I experience myself as awareness and as presence and as energy that just moves beyond words. So, but socially, I'm moved through structures like we all do, where immediately meaning is being assigned to my body. I think lots of women know what I'm talking about. And unfortunately, a part of me has internalized that gaze. And this internalized gaze, that objectifying gaze, it, you know, is not limited to the body. It also targets your social role, yeah? Your usefulness, your status, your kind of assigned function within the system, which might be a system that does not even represent your values, right? Think about that. I've been in a 16-year relationship. I talked about that a lot here. I separated 2 years ago. I have a child, and yeah, you know, for the first time in my life, I'm consciously choosing to be on my own, to be single. And it's not that I would reject love, real love, if it comes my way. I just don't want to chase it out of this fear of being alone. You know, being single on my own, it's not something that comes easy to me, not because I don't like being on my own, but because I'm a very relational person. And it does not happen often to me that I feel connected on a soul level, but if I do, it's just something that makes me feel very real and very alive, and, you know, deep mutual connection. But I just want to say that we need to be aware of our own trauma. We need to get to know ourselves better, and we can't expect someone else to come into our lives and to kind of magically heal those wounds for us. There are some relationships that function that way, actually. You know, lots of relationships repeat attachment patterns from early childhood, toxic attachment patterns. And that can kind of work, but it's not really healthy, I would say. I don't have a better expression right now, sorry. And so I don't want to do that. And right now I would say that I'm kind of shifting from attachment mode to, I don't know, maybe subject mode or self-reference mode. I don't know. I don't have the language for it yet, but I have to tell you, it requires something very, very uncomfortable, which is meeting and embracing myself and my whole messy authenticity without being mirrored by a partner.
Time undivided moves in circles, trapped like a wave in a tidal pool. Waves upon waves, the horizon in view, but out of reach. I've been saying that something needs to change. I've been saying that someday I'll change.
There is so much talk about authenticity, especially now with the fire horse energy approaching. If you're into Chinese metaphysics, I'm not an expert, but I find it very interesting. I resonate very much with that. And I just want to remind us that authenticity isn't something you can force. And authenticity oftentimes doesn't feel bold and powerful at first. I would say quite the opposite. I would say oftentimes it can feel like we're shrinking at first. We can feel smaller and kind of more vulnerable and unarmored and exposed at first. And if you're very used to feeling real through being seen, through being desired, admired, validated, and when that external gaze falls away, it can feel like you're disappearing at first. So who am I now, right? That I'm not being seen, or reconnecting with myself, right? And you know, we all have our imperfections. We all have our difficult sides, you know, the ones that, you know, are not that easy to digest, and we all make mistakes. And none of us want to be reduced to them, right? And because how many people, just think about your own life, how many people cut you off in that moment when you become inconvenient, or the moment you trigger something in them. How many connections just survive as long as you're easy to digest. But that's not what connections and relationships are about. Like, I feel that's such a big misconception. They're not there to make us happy magically. They are there to help each other grow and recognize ourselves and the other, or recognizing ourselves through each other fully, right? That's what relationships and connections are for. So when I talk about shedding old skin, because we're in the last, like, as I'm recording this, last days of the year of the wood snake, when I'm talking about letting go of old patterns, we need to ask ourselves what those patterns once gave us. And we need to be very honest with that. Maybe they gave us belonging, a sense of control. Maybe they gave us, I don't know, safety. Yeah. And of course, letting go of that is hard. It doesn't happen overnight. And shedding is not linear. It comes in returns and in setbacks, and just the moment you thought that you transcended something, it just comes back suddenly. And like I said, these last 2 weeks for me were very dark. I struggled with severe chronic pain, and it brought back a lot of old patterns, old thoughts and feelings. And a part of me thought I thought I was further by now, but maybe this thought is actually part of the old skin. That thought, I should be further by now. I think the real shift is not in never falling back. The real shift is being able to say, this too belongs. The real shift happens through inclusion, integration, saying this longing belongs, this fear belongs, this resistance belongs. And instead of resisting resistance, which just traps us in a vicious cycle, we practice radical self-acceptance and compassionate awareness with ourselves and with whomever we're in a relationship with. And I heard people say that the fire horse energy will burn away old skin. And maybe that's true. Maybe false securities will burn away. Maybe old identities will deflate. Maybe illusions will dissolve. Most likely that will happen. And that burning might feel uncomfortable before it feels liberating. We need to keep that in mind. But what I feel is that the most intelligent thing we can do in times like these is return to our subjectivity and to remember, I'm not an object, I'm not a mirror, I'm not a reflection, I'm the one who experiences, I'm not mirror dependent, I'm self-referenced, and I'm grounded in my own being. Yeah, so I think that is what this shift is asking from me. I would, but also say from us collectively, as we move towards February 17th. Maybe you're already watching it in the future. So, yeah. And for now, I just want to thank you for keeping me company till the end. And I'm very grateful for you. And I hope you're safe and you're well. And I hope to see you very soon.